This week on The Record, we're off to the races. 72 days until America decides, and at the Democratic National Convention,
hope is making a comeback.
America's power couple sets out to reframe this race as a change election, with one incumbent stepping down.
America, I gave my best to you.
A new candidate jumps into the race against a former incumbent, hoping for a fresh start with voters.
We are charting a new way forward.
It's all coming up on The Record. Welcome to The Record from the road in Chicago. I'm Mark Maxwell here inside the Democratic National Convention Hall in the United Center, where this week we saw Democrats celebrate the speedy coronation of a new ticket. Vice President Kamala Harris and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz.
I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
It's the honor of my life to accept your nomination for Vice President of the United States.
He's worn a lot of important titles in his career, governor, command sergeant major, but when he addressed the nation Wednesday night, they called him coach. Tim Walz, the former high school football coach who won a state title, wasted little time going on offense.
Some folks just don't understand what it takes to be a good neighbor. Take Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Their Project 2025 will make things much, much harder for people who are just trying to live their lives. They spent a lot of time pretending they know nothing about this. But look, I coached high school football long enough to know, and trust me on this, when somebody takes the time to draw up a playbook, they're going to use it.
And the vice president made her case to become the first woman to hold the nation's top job.
And we know what a second Trump term would look like. It's all laid out in Project 2025, written by his closest advisors, and its sum total is to pull our country back to the past. But America, we are not going back. We are not going back.
A steady stream of high-profile Democrats rallied the crowd here leading up to Vice President Harris's big night.
Chicago! It's good to be home!
Appearances from the Obamas, the Clintons, Joe Biden provided that steady stream of each of the last three Democratic presidents and the last four Democratic presidential nominees, a stark contrast from the Republican National Convention we saw in Milwaukee last month, where President Bush, former presidential nominee Mitt Romney, and former Vice President Mike Pence not only weren't welcome, but are actively urging Americans to vote against Donald Trump.
For years, Donald Trump did everything in his power to try to make people fear us. See, his limited, narrow view of the world made him feel threatened by the existence of two hard-working, highly educated, successful people who happen to be black. Wait. I want to know, who's going to tell him that the job he's currently seeking might just be one of those black jobs?
It is one of the oldest tricks in politics. From a guy whose act has, let's face it, gotten pretty stale. We do not need 4 more years of bluster and bumbling and chaos. We have seen that movie before, and we all know that the sequel is usually worse.
Barack and Michelle Obama dealing Donald Trump a devastating 1-2 punch, directly challenging his claim of a stronger connection with the common man.
Most of us will never be afforded the grace of failing forward. We will never benefit from the affirmative action of generational wealth. If we bankrupt a business or choke in a crisis, we don't get a second, third, or fourth chance. If things don't go our way, we don't have the luxury of whining or cheating others to get further ahead. No. We don't get to change the rules so we always win. If we see a mountain in front of us, we don't expect there to be an escalator waiting to take us to the top. No. We put our heads down. We get to work. In America, we do something.
Democrats tapped into star power from other Chicago celebrities who made direct appeals to independent and undecided voters.
I've always voted my values, and that is what is needed in this election now more than ever. So I'm calling on all you independents and all you undecideds. You know this is true. You know I'm telling you the truth, that values and character matter most of all. In leadership and in life. And more than anything, you know this is true, that decency and respect are on the ballot in 2024.
Perhaps the most surprising appearances came from Republicans, including one who worked as Donald Trump's press secretary in the White House.
I wasn't just a Trump supporter, I was a true believer. I was one of his closest advisors. The Trump family became my family. I saw him when the cameras were off. Behind closed doors, Trump mocks his supporters. He calls them basement dwellers. Now here I am, behind a podium, advocating for a Democrat. And that's because I love my country more than my party. Kamala Harris tells the truth. She respects the American people, and she has my vote.
And another, Air Force Lieutenant Colonel and former Illinois Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger.
The Republican Party has switched its allegiance from the principles that gave it purpose to a man whose only purpose is himself. Donald Trump is a weak man pretending to be strong. He is a small man pretending to be big. He's a faithless man pretending to be righteous. He's a perpetrator who can't stop playing the victim.
The pivot to promote Kamala Harris as a fresh candidate was only possible because her running mate, Joe Biden, stepped aside.
It's been the honor of my lifetime to serve as your president. I love the job, but I love my country more.
Biden's exit won praise from the man who elevated him to vice president 16 years ago.
We needed a leader who was steady and brought people together and was selfless enough to do the rarest thing there is in politics, putting his own ambition aside for the sake of the country. History will remember Joe Biden as an outstanding president who defended democracy at a moment of great danger.
We're here now with Kristen Welker, you know and love her, the host and moderator of Meet the Press. Good to have you with us. Thanks for doing this.
Great to be with you.
We hear a lot about a post-convention bump, but here the Democrats kind of had a pre-convention bump with the change at the top of the ticket. Do you think there's two bumps to be had? Can they also score another one here?
We'll have to wait and see. I think that's actually the big question. They're certainly trying to have a big bump. What we saw Tuesday night, that 1-2 punch by former President Barack Obama, former First Lady Michelle Obama, who may have upstaged her husband, by the way, was a lot of energy, electricity inside the convention hall. The goal is to have a little bounce. If they do have a bounce, that is hugely significant and would put them into a pretty powerful position with just 70-some days to go at that point until Election Day.
Yeah, and a lot of vibes. There's that energy. We'll wait to see the policy specifics fill in. So this is what we're getting here is a taste of what Democrats are selling the country. Over this next 10, 11-week sprint to November 5, what are you going to look for to see if voters in those swing states are buying what they're selling here?
Well, we'll be out in the swing states talking to voters. That's one way to make sure that we're keeping our finger on the pulse of what they're saying, what they're feeling. But of course, the polls are going to be so important as well as we head into this home stretch. Right now, what we've seen in the polls is just extraordinary. President Biden was losing to Trump nationally and in key battleground states. Now, Vice President Harris has narrow leads nationally in some of the key battleground states, all within the margin of error. So this is still an incredibly close, if not tied race. But the point is, right now, she does seem to have momentum. Can she keep it going? And will she start to do more interviews? Will she start to make herself more available and to answer more questions? I think that the debate coming up in September is going to be pivotal.
We saw that with President Biden and how decisive that can be. Kristen Welker, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Great conversation.
The coordinated choreographed events of this week offered us fresh insights into the messaging we're likely to see from Democrats over the next 10 or 11 weeks or so in this pivotal election year. One of the most notable moments, a cautionary tale, a reminder of what could happen in November.
The story of my life and the history of our country is that progress is possible, but not guaranteed.
Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton urging women who backed her in 2016 to surge again to the polls and finish the job they started then.
Together, we've put a lot of cracks in the highest, hardest glass ceiling.
One of her biggest boosters in 2016, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, connected that presidential push to the popular push for equal pay and promotions for equal work.
We have a choice, America, between the man who left our country a total mess and the woman who has spent 4 years cleaning it up. And I think it's time we stop expecting women to clean up messes without the authority and the title to match the job.
The continued appeal to women, signaling Democrats see one of Donald Trump's biggest electoral weaknesses.
MAGA Republicans found out the power of women in 2022. And Donald Trump is going to find out the power of women in 2024.
You could hear consistent themes and through lines throughout the messaging in these scripted speeches, revealing the types of voters Democrats are targeting and the types of politics they're selling to them. We heard populist appeals to working class voters in service jobs.
And I, for one, am tired of hearing about how a two-bit union buster thinks of himself as more of a patriot than the woman who fights every single day to lift working people out from under the boots of greed, trampling on our way of life. The truth is, Don, you cannot love this country if you only fight for the wealthy and big business.
And moral appeals to the faith community coming from the minister, who stands now in Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s pulpit.
A vote is a kind of prayer for the world we desire for ourselves and for our children, and our prayers are stronger when we pray together.
Senator Raphael Warnock wove together the pain of poverty and violence and placed the responsibility at the feet of voters.
I need my neighbor's children to be okay so that my children will be okay. I need all of my neighbor's children to be okay. Poor inner city children in Atlanta and poor children of Appalachia. I need the poor children of Israel and the poor children of Gaza. I need Israelis and Palestinians. I need those in the Congo, those in Haiti, those in Ukraine. I need American children on both sides of the track to be okay. Because we are all God's children.
All of it leading to a call to civic action.
We cannot get a Goldilocks complex about whether everything is just right. And we cannot indulge our anxieties about whether this country will elect someone like Kamala instead of doing everything we can to get someone like Kamala elected.
We're here with Mark Murray now, the senior political editor from NBC News. It's great to see you here at the DNC. I've got to ask you, in all your years of covering national politics, where does this 6 to 8 week stretch rank, just in how incredible it's been?
Among the craziest. And of course, in the 2020 cycle, remember we had COVID. In 2016, you ended up having Access Hollywood. For the last 6 weeks, we've seen 2 conventions, an assassination attempt, 2 vice presidential rollouts, and a change in the Democratic ticket, all culminating in this convention. And so my only advice is, this has been a topsy-turvy last 6 weeks. I think we're going to be in store for even more over the next 3 months.
Yeah, and we get to write that first draft of history, but the final chapter will be written on November 5th. When you're looking at the polling and all the things that are changing, can you really trust any polling right now with all the different variables moving?
There is no doubt that we had polling misses in 2016 and 2020, but what is kind of clear is this race has changed. And whether you believe that Harris is ahead or Donald Trump is ahead, Harris and the Democrats are in a stronger position today than they were when Joe Biden is in the race. And so regardless of the polls, regardless if you believe there's a change, this race has transformed. And now we're going to have to wait for the next 3 months to see just how much it's transformed and who ends up winning.
Let's talk about the battleground, the road to 270. Republicans put their convention in the heart of a battleground state, Wisconsin. Democrats are driving up energy in their reliably blue state here in Chicago, right? The heart of the political machine. What do you make of that decision? Did that factor in, do you think?
Look, so sometimes the convention city that you host your convention in does matter to help you win it in November. We ended up seeing Barack Obama, Denver. They won Colorado. You know, you ended up seeing in 2012, though, the Democrats had their convention in Charlotte, North Carolina. They ended up losing North Carolina that election season. So it's not always predictive of what ends up happening. But to me, Chicago matters because it is central to the Midwest and a lot of important battleground states. And so sometimes it's not about the state, but about the media markets. It's also about the overall attention that you end up having too. But you know, this is about them having the ability to kind of close the deal. And what is so important about conventions is this is your best chance to put a scripted foot forward, to tell your story kind of uninterrupted to the American public without the attacks coming from the other side. And we'll see how effective the Democrats are.
All right, now November 5th, take me there that night. Are you watching, if you're watching just 3 states, I'm going to put you on the spot here for a minute. Which 3 states are you watching most closely and why?
Well, so it's always about the early side of things. And so Florida, to me, comes in incredibly early on the East Coast. And so what we've seen in 2016 and even 2020 was that Donald Trump ended up performing so much better on the day of vote in Florida. So I'm going to see if he has some juice. We're going to know right away, very early around in the 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock hour in Florida. Obviously, Virginia is another state that comes in very, very early. And then, you know, we're going to be watching Pennsylvania. And so I'm going to kind of keep an East Coast focus a little bit. And to me, those 3 kind of early states with early-ish poll closing calls could be determinative.
All right, he's Mark Murray, the brains of the operation, the senior political editor at NBC News. Mark, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
20 years ago at the Democratic National Convention, a younger junior senator from Illinois addressed the nation and gave East St. Louis a shout-out as he called on the country to overcome our divisions at the time, to join in the common cause and focus on the United States of America. We elected him president 4 years later. So let's check the record. The country promoted Senator Obama to president because he showed that ability then to reach across the aisle and appeal to enough voters on the other team to build a true coalition. And this week at the DNC, the former president returned to that same stage, echoing his calls for all Americans to spot the dividers among us, see them for what they are, and reject the temptation to hate people we might disagree with.
We live in a time of such confusion and rancor, with a culture that puts a premium on things that don't last. We chase the approval of strangers on our phones. We build all manner of walls and fences around ourselves, and then we wonder why we feel so alone. We don't trust each other as much because we don't take the time to know each other. But here's the good news, Chicago. All across America, in big cities and small towns, away from all the noise, the ties that bind us together are still there. We still coach Little League. We still feed the hungry in churches and mosques and synagogues and temples. We share the same pride when our Olympic athletes compete for the gold. Because the vast majority of us do not want to live in a country that's bitter and divided.
That does it for us this week. Thank you for watching. We'll see you back in St. Louis next week. Until then, we're off the record.